Welcome to the Open Door podcast. My name is Patrick.
And my name is Anthony. In this episode, we have the pleasure of talking with Tracy. She is an English teacher in Japan, working in an elementary school and in language exchange studios for adults.
We make a lot of comparisons in this episode. Anthony and Tracy compare their experiences in public schools with my experience in a private school. Anthony, who has lived in Korea, compares his experiences with Tracy, who is currently living in Japan. And as someone that will go on to live in Singapore, this was incredibly insightful.
Also, this is the first actual episode that we recorded. So if our discussion skills are a bit rough in this one, please bear with us. Timestamps are in the description if you want to skip forward to any particular parts, but without further ado, this is Tracy. Tracy, can you tell us what is it like to move to an Asian country as an Asian diaspora yourself?
Interesting question. It really is interesting because I came here as a person from UK. Obviously, I look very Asian and I have very Asian aspects to me, but I'm actually Western in quite many ways. But people here, they really get caught up in my ethnicity, and when they ask me where I'm from and I say, I'm from the UK, they're not really satisfied with that answer and they go on to ask, oh, where are your parents from? But then over time, I've just become okay with it because I know that, and I've now come to understand more and accept that my nationality isn't my race. In fact, it's kind of okay for them to ask that because it provides another opportunity for me to tell them there are many diasporas, around the world. I'm one of them. My parents moved from here to here and I was born here. And I think being able to live in Asia is a really good opportunity for me to explore the East Asian side of, even though I'm not in China, but it's still, I can see a lot of those things. It's not something that you can grasp when you're just traveling because there's many everyday things that you don't really see. When you're traveling, you see the real surface of things. So when you really live here, you can see into a lot of things. I really encourage people to live abroad at least once in their lives. I'm sure Anthony would agree as well.
Yeah, totally. When I went to Korea, I was able to do things the Asian way and not be judged by other people because everyone else was Asian. It was
Can you give an example?
Well, just going out and eating food, and you can see everyone else is Asian. They're eating the same food, enjoying it as much as you are. It's very humbling that they know more than you about their culture. It's very humbling to be in an environment eating Korean food cooked by native Korean chefs with native Korean people. It was a very open and relaxed feeling. I wasn't really anxious about anything. I could just enjoy being myself and being unapologetically Asian.
That's such a good point.
And it's something I can't do here in the UK because I always have this cloud of judgment. I think it's just programmed into me living here in the UK. But when you go to Asia, I'm sure Patrick will feel this in Singapore too, that you can just be so free to be yourself, to let your Asian side come through. It's very educational. You notice you do things you didn't do before in the UK. I'm not sure if that's something you felt, Tracy, when you were living in Japan.
Yeah, that's such a good, I really like how you use the word humbling, being cooked Korean food by local Korean people. And it's that kind of equality that you can enjoy the food amongst people of that culture. But it's like being able to appreciate local goods, local produces, and having that connection with the country and its food. And another thing that I find really beautiful is being able to absorb yourself in the culture. I learned about Japanese history before I came to Japan, and being able to really feel the volume of it when I'm here. It's just really beautiful.
Yeah, going back to the beautiful point, I was a teacher to elementary school, and they would have these regular sessions where they sing the Korean national anthem together outside on the courts. And for us teachers, we had to stand at the front in a row and we face the children whilst they sing. And they all had their hands to their chest, like you would do for the national anthem. And I was just standing there really awkward. I don't know if I should be doing it or not because I'm not Korean.
But you look Korean.
Yeah, I was so confused whether I should do it. Should I put my hand there or should I not? Would that be offensive? I don't know. I can't remember what I did, but I remember feeling a sense of beautiful sadness because it's something I never felt. I never could sing a national anthem.
Not even in the UK, you never sung it.
I mean, I don't think I really sang it and really meant it because I couldn't connect with it.
Wait, do you guys know the national anthem?
Yeah, I used
Like,
to
you
sing
guys-
it when I was in primary school. It was like part of like, you know, we call it like school assemblies, and we used to sing it like
Yeah.
on special occasions. Maybe because like you guys are Southerners, right? I grew up in the Midlands, so they're probably like
Are
super.
they more patriotic?
Yeah,
or
they
something?
are. I literally went to a Catholic school, and in the
Yeah, me
middle of
too.
it was like the middle of nowhere.
You never sang the national anthem.
I don't remember. I don't recall singing it, if I'm going to be honest. I sang hymns and stuff. Like, I literally went to a school in a place called Midhurst, which is actually middle of nowhere in like farmlands. And I went to a Catholic school there called St. Margaret's, and yeah, we just sang hymns every Monday morning. We'd have mass, and we never
Oh.
sang the national anthem though. I don't think.
Wow.
Yeah, we used to always
That's
sing it.
interesting.
Not all the time, but maybe once a month. And like
Oh,
singing
wow.
class was like one of my favorite. Like I never knew at the time, but when I got a bit older, I realized they were all like Christian songs, and I have absolutely no connection with them.
Yeah.
But then I really
Yeah.
enjoyed
Yeah.
singing them.
Yeah, they were all Christian songs.
Yeah, we were like brainwashed.
Did you guys know the title? What was it? He's got the whole wide world in his hands. I think that
Yeah,
was the
yeah.
title.
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
That was catchy. That was a banger. That was a tune.
There were some classic hymns, but we had hymn books. Did you not have hymn books? And it'd be like, gonna just bang out number 4 today, you know, just turn your pages to number 4.
You had a
Yeah,
book?
put
Like
your
the
hands
words
up
are
in the
just-
air.
Yeah, we each had a hymn book.
Oh, I
like
didn't have
it was
that.
actually kind of cute.
Yeah, that's luxury.
It was.
And we
it
had
was
like a
proper
projector.
Catholic though.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we only had a projector, and everything was like handwritten. And we like
Oh,
project it on the wall.
Yeah. What you mean the old school ones with the see-through sheets?
Yeah, and then the
Yeah.
light at the top.
Oh my
No,
god.
that's
And
this
then
is-
whenever
that
someone
is a
walked by,
flashback.
we couldn't like read anything.
Anyway, so.
So I wanted to add on to what Anthony was saying. You're putting the hand on your heart to the anthem of
Yeah.
South Korea. And you said you feel awkward. Like it's similar to me in Japan. Bowing is such a big thing here. Like I let people through the door and they bow to me, and I'm just like, hold up, you don't need to bow. Like but it's such a common thing here to bow. I work in private schools, and they're like clients of my company, and the Japanese staff, they take me there and they bow like 90-degree proper professional bow. Then the clients, the actual school staff, they bow too, and then I sometimes feel really awkward because it's not part of me and it's not part of my culture to bow. So do I bow? Do I do the head nod? Do I bow halfway? You know, I always get commented like I look super Japanese. So for them to see me like such a Japanese looking person and to not bow, they're like confused. They're like, what is this person? Why is she not bowing?
So do you bow now?
I bow in some cases. I work for like 2 different school companies. For the more professional, like formal one, I would bow like a little bow. Because the thing is, it's a custom here. And I respect that. So I just try to do a little bit of it. But then because of my Asian appearance, I feel like I can't allow myself to do all the way because then they would just take me as a Japanese person. And that's not who I am. And once they take me as a Japanese person, the full expectations will be on me. So I don't really need that. It's a way to remain myself and keep who I am. But then I do a little bit of it without being rude.
So like a compromise.
Yeah,
To set the boundaries, yeah.
yeah.
I think that's my mistake.
Why? What did you do? Did you just?
Oh, yeah, what did you do?
Going back to the point where I look Korean and speak Korean, some people said that my Korean is accentless, and
Wow.
then they take it as I'm Korean, and then they start speaking to me in full-on fluent Korean, all technical terms, and I'm just like, oh my god, I'm just thinking, what am I doing? What have I done?
Yeah.
Now I have to do the awkward thing and say, okay, I'm not actually. I've just practiced this sentence a lot to make it sound
Yeah.
like I'm Korean. Yeah, not Korean. But going back to the bowing, because in Japan and Korea, it's hierarchy, right? So you gotta respect
Yeah,
senior.
hierarchy, super
Because
hierarchy. It's not
yeah,
something that
and
we obviously can see in the UK. Like
no,
even we're working in like offices. I worked in a few offices before, and the managers like we have like jokes and laugh about things together. But in Japan, you can't really do that.
don't do
When you
that.
see your boss, you like bow and you just say, "Oh,
Yeah.
how are you today?" And
One
yeah.
one of the craziest things I've seen in terms of hierarchy is when at the school we used to go out for meals and we used to drive all our separate cars, right? So the principals and the vice principals and the teachers. So sometimes the teachers would leave early and the vice principal and the principal would come later. So when all the teachers and staff got to the restaurant, they got out of their cars and they couldn't go inside before the principal came. You just were not allowed to. You had to wait outside. And then you notice at the restaurant, the teachers parked everywhere but the front door, near the front. That's for the
Uh,
principal. So the principal must park nearest to the door. Otherwise, that's really disrespectful.
super
Yeah.
super hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, so the principal has to have the shortest distance from her car to the door.
It's similar to in Japan
It's
as well,
insane.
like these kind of things. Like you're not allowed to use like, women like, nice bags and shoes or whatever. Guys as well. And you're not supposed to use like more expensive or like better looking things than like your
Mhm.
seniors. I'm sure in like Korea as well, like when you have like work things, you're supposed to like pour drinks for your seniors. But
Right,
in
yeah.
like the West, it's like totally casual. We don't really care about this. Obviously, we be polite and towards each other, but it's not like super hypersensitive like this.
Pouring drinks for like superiors is a bit like that's a bit too bit much.
Yeah, like when I was in UK and I worked for the Japanese company, my boss was Japanese, and his it's a really interesting dynamic because he's from Japan, like straight from Japan, and I'm like totally British, and he does a lot of things that are now I understand are like super Japanese. But at the time, I was just like, "What are you doing?" But then I didn't do a lot of things. Obviously, I treated him like he was my boss, and do things for him, and if work wise. But then I didn't really like do anything. Like some people like get breakfast or like get drinks and things, but like I never feel like I had to do that because in my previous works, like my offices, I never had to do anything like that. So like to come to Japan and have to bow to, people. Sometimes I feel quite awkward to do that in a way. And like sometimes I don't really know my position to do that.
How did your parents sort of react to you moving to Japan, like so far away?
Mm, yeah, that's a good question. My dad wasn't really fond of it at the beginning. He was kind of like, why do you need to go so far away when you have everything here? But now he's just kind of like accepted it.
Yeah.
And like now he's like trying to play it like, oh, I'm gonna allow you to stay there because now it's the pandemic. So please just
Allow you.
yeah, please just stay there now. And I'm thinking like,
Oh gosh.
okay. Yeah, but my mom has been quite supportive of me. She's I actually really want her to come to Japan as well to take her to all the places because like this would have been something that she would have wanted to do when she was younger. So she would just say like just do it, even though I know secretly both of them probably talk behind my back and be like, oh, when is she gonna come back? Oh God, this pandemic means that she can't come back until next year. Probably like secretly like plotting something. Yeah, I mean, how did your parents react, Anthony, like, when you went to Korea?
Um, well, luckily my parents are quite open-minded and they let me do a lot of things actually, as long as I thought them through. If I thought them through and I'm confident with my choices, I think they allow me to do most things. But I think secretly they were sad. I mean, of course, your son or daughter is leaving the home and they're not going to the next city in the same country. They're going to a place on the other side of the world,
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a strange place they've never been before. They've never been to
yeah.
Korea.
Yeah. I mean, with my family, particularly my dad as well, because they've been like from my grandfather, we've been like diasporas. They really can't understand the idea of voluntarily moving to another country. So
Hmm.
they think me moving to London was like my mom once told me like she said that she felt she was like letting go of me or like she's like giving me away. when I went to London. So for me to move to another country is like,
Yeah.
I think they're like, oh, they're like cutting one of their arm or something.
Patrick, what was your mum said about you moving to Singapore for 4 years?
Oh yeah, and you have like 4 years. Like there's a number they can count down.
Yeah.
Once you leave, Patrick, your mum will set a timer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she'll buy the next 4 years of calendars and then
Yeah.
just like cross out each
And just
day.
mark it.
Yeah.
Date of return. She's gonna start planning what you're gonna eat when you come back, like the menu.
She hasn't really expressed any worry. I think she likes to put on like a brave face or something, if you know what I mean. And she doesn't really show much emotions, so she hasn't really like worried about me or anything. And I think she in general trusts that I know what I'm doing. And she's kind of this is like one of the first times I've ever seen her like almost visibly proud that I'm gonna be doing a PhD. It's a bit weird, and I think I'm worrying more than she is, to be honest.
Your mom's like,
yeah.
he's gonna come back a doctor, so I'm gonna put her with
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah.
Compromise.
She's like, it's worth it.
Compromise. It's worth it. He's gonna be a doctor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can wait 4 years. Yeah. If he's going to be a doctor, I can wait.
So Tracy, you talked about going to Catholic school, and in your article about the crafted model minority, you talk about going to public school and how you thought that was a really, really good experience and you wouldn't trade it for the world. So can you tell us a bit more about that? Because you talk about how it helped you build up empathy for people with less privileged backgrounds, and how did it contribute to the person that you are today?
So I'm not saying that public school or private school is better. It's a personal experience for everybody and valuable in their own sense. I think we also have to consider that when you go to a public school, it's not just different cultures, it's family backgrounds, family dynamics, financial situations. And then when you're at that age, there's also adolescent issues, self-esteem, personalities. There's so much going on at the time. So the way that I analyze it now is that there are like two sides to it. It's like you put a load of people together, different backgrounds, cultures, personalities. It's all mushed together. My school had a lot of different kind of people, like Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, everything. They're on this same institution day in, day out. It's literally like a battleground. And you come out of there, you suffer many things, and then you have a bad experience and you suffer for life. Maybe you heal from it, I don't know. Or like the people, you're able to embrace it and embrace all the different people, different things that happen in school. You develop an understanding of what the real world is like, have connection with real people, what of British people, the real Britain. It's not just London, it's like people who are outside, There are so many different people. And then you learn from that and you develop a unique view of your society, your world. You're able to build better relationships. So in that sense, you gain in life. And the reason why I split it like this is because I was the first point that I said. When I graduated from, I left secondary school, I loathed it so much. I never even looked back on the day that we walked away. I was so happy to start my new life. But now, looking back, I'm at maybe 0.2, whereas I can learn from everything that I went through. I'm not saying that it wasn't bad or it wasn't like painful. I would never want to go through it again. The bullying and mistreatment of like friendships, the way teachers treated you. I would never want to go through it again. But then I took it and then translated it into a way for me to become. My experience has made who I am today because I've taken it and turned it into another perspective for me to be able to see different things in the world, like people seeing it every day, like people struggling, going through racism, bullying, struggling with friendships. It made me not be blind to so many things, like emotions, feelings around these things. So, and it also helps me because now I'm a teacher in a kindergarten and elementary kids. So it makes me be able to help them as well in a way. I feel like people who go through suffering of certain things, you're able to read between the lines and things. So I think in that sense, answering your question, has it helped to build empathy? You know, people who went to public or state school. So for me, the answer would be yes. I don't know what you think, Patrick, because you went to private school, didn't you?
Yeah, so I had a pretty rough experience in public school for the short amount of time that I was in public. So I went to public school from like reception to year two. So that's what, 4 till 7, like around that age. I got a lot of bullying and racism, and the thing that really pushed the limit was when I got stabbed in the eye. Some kid came up to me and just literally shoved a stick in my eye. My mum was like, okay, this is it. This is too much. Before it was just verbal and talking about my eyes, and I went to the school not knowing how to speak English. And the teachers were a little bit concerned at first because they thought, oh, maybe he needs to talk to someone to develop his social skills. So the school actually brought a Chinese lady in that could speak Cantonese with me like once a week to make sure that I wasn't mute or something. But yeah, just the environment wasn't really great for me. So from year 3 onwards, I went to that Catholic convent school I talked about, which was a private school. And there was still a bit of racism there, but it was more kind of elitism, I think, because I wasn't as rich as the other kids. And this increased so much more when I went to like middle school, secondary school, like from year 7 onwards. I went to a very like not very posh, but it was posh for the area of Portsmouth. And I didn't get a lot of racism there. So like I think we'll have lots of different experiences with bullying between us, but mine was more like class based, and because I chose to make friends with someone who everyone saw as a little bit odd. They bullied him for being allegedly gay. He wasn't gay, but there was a lot of homophobia. Maybe I just happened to go to school with a bunch of really ignorant people, but I've experienced discrimination myself, and I'm not about to like just stand aside and watch as someone else gets discriminated against. So I chose to make friends with him, and he was a really nice guy in the end. I mean, he was a bit weird, but who isn't, you know? So yeah, I got a lot of homophobic based bullying as well as class based, and it was just all a bit snobby. And similar to you, Tracy, I wouldn't ever want to repeat that experience, to be honest. But I do look back on it, and I think it has made me slightly more resilient emotionally, at least. What kind of bullying would you get, if you don't mind me asking, like if you don't mind reliving the experience, Tracy?
It was more like, obviously, my race. That was a big factor. My school I was like one of the 5 Asian kids out of like over 1,000 students. So really, really stood out. So race, the way I looked, I didn't have many friends. I didn't want to make many friends because of the way I was treated. And my friends were sort of like internally treating me badly as well. So then I had a lot of trust issues with friendship. Like the concept of friendship was so fragile. When you're like 14, 15 years old, you think that your friends are your friends, right? You stick together. But then when they betray you and do things like that, it's like another level of, bullying. The bullies are not your friends. But when your friends bully you too, it's like you question what it is in life that is actually real. So it has affected me long term in terms of trusting who friends are and things.
I don't know about your experiences with bullying and their effects on mental health, but for me, I didn't really have people at school I could talk to. And when I came home, my mum was usually at work. So I'd come home and it would be empty because I was, only child. And there's just like not really many people to talk to.
Tracy, what about your experiences like that?
I didn't really know how to talk about it. My mind was just processing it. And like when you experience things like that, your mind is like constantly living in that fear, and the worry, what's going to happen. And at the time, you're still so young. You don't really know what's going on. And when you suffer that, it affects like, I can honestly say that until today, right now, I'm affected by it. I've never ever spoken to my parents about it until last year. And the time when I was going through school, And it also happened within my group of friends as well. And it really made me question, what is friendship? What are relationships? Like for a long time, it wasn't even until university when I was able to form, proper relationships with people. Even nowadays, I don't have a lot of friends, but I have enough friends. But then, like, when I went to university was when I realized that I can be myself. I'm learning to build my identity for who I am. I can talk to people. I can learn about proper things in the society. Before that, it was just a case of trying to get somewhere. I couldn't wait for the day that I leave school and move on. Like the day that I left school, I felt like something new was coming and I could leave like that behind.
Yeah. My experience of leaving school was a bit similar in that. So my school had a sixth form, right? But I chose to leave and just go to college. I wasn't really good with goodbyes, and like the way I handled it was probably not the best, but I didn't actually tell anyone I was leaving, not even my friends. When I left, no one knew it was my last day, and I just left. And I wasn't really sad, I was kind of almost relieved.
Yeah, relief is a really good word.
Yeah.
Like you
And
never have
like,
to deal with this constant fear of what's going to happen or how people are going to see you. Like the day that I left school, I just literally just kept walking, like to go home.
Me too.
And like I literally felt so good. I was like, freedom at last. Whatever is ahead of me is way better than anything that's happened to me the last 5 years. Do you know what I mean? It's just that kind of, it's almost like prison. Like you're leaving.
Freedom, yeah. I was kind of the same, and looking back on it, I probably would have handled it a bit different because obviously it wasn't very nice for my friends though to not know that I was just gonna be gone next year.
But then you can't, when you're so young, you don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, I just remember walking to the train station and I was a little bit numb, but I was also quite like, yeah, like a load had been lifted. And when I went to college, my experience was actually very, very different. So college, this was like a state school kind of place. I anticipated more bullying because of my previous experience of state school, but everyone was just too busy doing their own stuff to even notice other people that were like being weird or different. Everyone just accepted everyone else. And everyone at college, most of them wanted to be there. So there was no bullying for being clever. There was no bullying for like trying hard. There was no bullying for sticking out. I was really pleasantly surprised actually.
Do you feel like the days after you left college or school, do you think that's when your personality was finally free to develop how it's supposed to develop? Because at school, you were just anxious about the bullying and the racism, and your personality couldn't develop the way it should be.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. You're just trying to survive. There's no any personality, no other side. It's just you trying to get out alive, So when I moved to London, I felt like I was able to be who I am and explore my person, my identity, my personality, and discover so many other sides that I have of myself.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do and what you can be when there's no anxiety in your life.
Anxiety has always been part of my life. Like I care so much about what people think of me. Do they think it's okay? Is it because of how I look? I care way too much because of all those years of people telling you like, you look weird, why do you look that way? What's wrong with you? These comments they like form itself into something and like sticks with you. Like I said before, like you can heal from racism, but you never really fully heal from it.
No, you can't. Yeah.
So you mentioned that when you went home, you weren't really able to talk about your feelings with your parents or anything. And was there anyone at all you could confide in, or you just had to keep it all to yourself?
Yeah, I did a lot of keeping it to myself. Didn't really know how to talk. Like now I'm quite a more outspoken person, but when I was younger, I was always keeping to myself. Never really wanted to talk to people. And I think it's because of my experiences. I had trust issues with people. Like I feel like if I tell them this, then, what are they going to do to me? And like, because I was the older sister, I had to look after them as well. And like my parents, I didn't really know how to tell them these things. Like they wouldn't really understand. They would just be like, oh, just forget about it. It's nothing. So last year was the first time that I opened up to my parents about these things. And even my dad was saying, no, it's nothing. Why do you keep it in your mind? Why do you keep it in your heart? You don't need to do that, But then they don't really relate to the fact that it goes so much deeper than, it's not like I'm literally throwing it out, I can't actually do that.
Yeah.
It's like in your mind. It really affects you mentally, like long term.
Yeah.
So when your father said that, were you upset that he brushed it off so lightly?
I wasn't upset because he's not trying to brush it off in a way. My dad is quite a funny person. He always tries to laugh about things to make me feel better. But I do think that he's trying to brush off the fact that racism exists a lot in our society. But he's not brushing off the fact that I'm hurt. He's trying to like comfort me in like a lighthearted way. And he laughs about it. But he is in a way brushing off the fact that there's a lot of racism happening. I don't know how I really feel about that because it doesn't really affect them as much as it affects me because they have a language barrier. So they're not like, it's like indirectly affecting them. They're not like crying about it or anything. Would you be upset about it, Anthony, if your dad said that, like brushing it off?
I think now not so much, but if I was younger, of course, because when you grow up, especially when you go around to other people's houses and you see how they interact with their parents and you notice all the differences, all the nuances, and you can't help but compare it to your family. And when you're younger, emotions control you more than you control it. So when you go back home to your parents, you start thinking in your head, oh, why aren't they like that? Why didn't they treat me like that? How the white parents treated their kids, why are they like this? You start being quite irrational and start resenting it. You're resenting how your family is. If you asked me that when I was younger, I think I would be quite angry. But now, living life as I have, I sort of understand why the dynamic of our families are like this. And you sort of understand, you have to really see it from their side as well. And that's sort of reiterating what you said about before, about the going to school with so many different people, right? You sort of empathize.
I really relate to Anthony's point because I feel like our generation, because we're in the UK and most likely we're able to speak our mother tongue better than our parents can speak English. So it's on us. Like we have to do the empathizing. We have to do the compromising, a lot of it. So it does put a lot of pressure on us because when we have to explain some things, like the way something works, we have to explain it so they can understand. So I think in terms of what Anthony said with like father-son relationship, Anthony has to do a lot more to keep the relationship going more than his dad needs to do, even though your father needs to put in a lot as well.
Because we're the ones with inside knowledge on both cultures. We've been to other people's houses. We know their dynamics. So we have to be the ones to mediate between the two. Patrick, what about you? What about telling your mum, about experiences and her brushing it off? Did she ever brush anything off?
Yeah, she just told me to ignore it. She's like, oh, just don't pay any attention to those people. If you ignore it, it will go away. And it didn't really go away for me. My experience wasn't that if I ignore it, it will go away. In fact, if anything, it got worse. They say if you ignore it and you don't give them a response, they'll get bored eventually. But for me, my experience was that they tried even harder to get a response from me. I mean, I guess I was upset in a sense when I told my mum and she, was kind of underplaying how serious it was. I was more frustrated that I couldn't seem to get my point across and she couldn't really see it from my point of view. I think there's a culture barrier because mental health is not so widely talked about in Asia. It's still quite a taboo subject, I think. In fact, literally just last week, I had a very long talk with my mum about mental health and I had to explain to her that depression isn't the same as just being sad. It's not as simple as that. Quite often it tends to be like a chemical imbalance. Sometimes it can be quite debilitating. So I think they lack empathy on their side as well because they're not aware of mental health and how it can affect someone. If you look at it from their point of view, they don't think it's a big deal. So therefore they didn't treat it as a big deal. And I kind of understand that now. But when I was younger, I definitely got a bit frustrated about that.
I think that's something that's going to change with our generation.
Yeah, for sure. Even now, though, in 2020, I hear that the awareness of mental health has improved quite a bit in Asian countries. people are more aware about depression and suicide and that kind of stuff. But I think there's still a long way to go from what I understand. What changes would you like to see in societies moving forward?
I hope that people can learn to have more empathy for people on the other side, people who you think are different to you. Just take the time to learn a little bit more. Because with things with multiculturalism, like no one is asking you to speak 20 languages. No one is asking you to take up my religion. It's just being aware that your society is a mixture of people and you just got to be respectful of that.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us and share your experiences. It's been a very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Tracy. So, that is the end of episode 4. That was a really interesting and thought-provoking episode. I just would like to thank Tracy for being so open with us about her story. We really appreciate it, as racism and bullying are very, very sensitive topics. She really shone a refreshing light on these experiences, and we're also very glad to have gained another friend after this episode. So Patrick, what did you think of our chat?
Yeah, I loved it. I'm glad I wasn't the only person that was relieved to have left school. All the people I know there seemed so sad, like they were going to miss those times so much, but I genuinely just felt relief. And as much as I love and miss the friends that I made there, the ignorant, homophobic and racist people that I encountered there were just the worst. So it was really nice to connect with her about that, which I didn't think we were going to do because of our differing opinions about public and private schools. And despite having more people around me back then, it was still one of my loneliest times. So it was really nice to retroactively feel not so alone.
Yeah, I mean, I love that term, retroactively feeling less alone. It's something I recall feeling as well when reminiscing about past experiences. And I think that is so true, especially when you relive a bad memory of someone where you both independently experienced it. But homophobia and racism are things you shouldn't be exposed to ever, period. I'm just so sorry to hear you guys went through that, but also at the same time, very glad that you guys could connect through it, despite attending very, very different institutions. I think it just goes to show that despite superficial differences of school uniforms and one of you having to pay tuition fees and the other not, the underlying deep realities of school life are still universal. They're still experienced by everyone in their childhood. And personally, I found it very comforting to connect with someone who moved from a position in the diaspora back into the East Asian country as an adult. It's such a strange feeling once you're over there, surrounded by Asians who look similar to you, after, decades of being marginalized by the majority race and culture. In other words, it's from minority status to a seemingly majority one. And when you're there, racism doesn't really seem to be an everyday burden anymore. And I know that Tracy is still in Japan right now, but once you move out and back into the UK again, you begin to miss being the majority and not having to worry about any verbal attacks on your skin color,
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear you both talk about moving to Asian countries as Asian diasporas, and just hearing about how you two settled in. I really liked when you used the words unapologetically Asian. I wonder how much of my personality comes from my Asian side and how much I feel like I have to apologize for, in day-to-day life. And if I'll start to notice it when I move to Singapore, I can't wait to feel unapologetically Asian,
I think it's a feeling you'll enjoy very much.
Yeah.
After having lived in the UK all your life.
Yeah.
But you know what would be cool? It would be very, very cool to update us on how you change as a person in Singapore during a PhD. I'm sure people will be very curious as to how the country will influence your identity. So please keep us up to date with that.
Yeah, we'll do.
So, if you ever lived abroad or planning on moving, we would love to hear about your experiences fitting into an East Asian society. Please tell us how you did. But for now, this is the end of episode 4. Also, Patrick might be moving to Singapore next week, so there might be potential delays to next week's episode. But we'll keep you informed on our social media. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.